Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. A bit of a lighter episode today as a result of, first of all, there's been no official news apparently at all. I'm tempted to start doing some kind of dev tracking thing, like, oh, this is what devs or what people have been saying on the forums, because the official forums are pretty interesting to go on and actually look at all of the posts that the mods and so forth have been making there. But it's also a hell of a lot of stuff to just kind of wade through to not really find that much. So I might end up doing that on days that there's no official news, but we'll see how it goes. There's been really nothing so far. And also this entire week, there's not been any patches either. So this will be interesting for on Monday, whether they put out any more updates. But hey, it is only Thursday at the moment, so they could do something else. Usually for a Thursday, there was two things I had scheduled that I want to talk about. First, I wanted to do a highlight on some kind of interesting thing that's going on in the community, whether that be a tool that someone's made, a cool video that someone's made, or so forth. And I do have something for that today. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was going to be legendary progress. I was thinking to myself, well, I kind of eventually want to go for a legendary weapon. It might be nice if I detail my adventure through that, how I slowly reach that point with a legendary weapon, and talk to you guys as I go about how I'm acquiring it and what order I'm doing everything in. However, because I'm spending so much time on the LP and particularly leveling quite a few characters, most of my time in game, to be honest, has been related to that at this point. And honestly, I can't see myself in a week's time have had too much progress towards the legendary weapon. Right now, I've got the 2 gifts of exploration for getting 100% map completion. But beyond that, I think it'll probably be a while before I seriously sit down and start looking into getting those. So, instead of that, today I'm going to do a question and possibly fill this with something else as we go forward. We'll see what happens. But in any case, the first thing, of course, then would be the community spotlight. First of all, there was a really cool rap video that someone did, which ArenaNet actually featured on their Facebook the other day. Really cool, actually. It reminds me a lot. I've always kind of enjoyed rap songs about particular games. It just feels so awesome. There was a really good one about the first game too, and this was quite cool. These guys are quite new. I think they've only been doing stuff for about 2 weeks. They did one about Game of Thrones as well, which I quite enjoyed. So yeah, there'll be a link to that in the description. I obviously can't show it on this video because it's theirs, but yeah, I would encourage you to check it out. It's quite funny. It's quite cool. And the other thing also, which I've been spending a lot of time on, so in Guild Wars 2, there is a language, well, there are multiple languages, but there's a language known as New Crichton. This is a written language. So in the in-game world, everybody speaks English, pretty much. They will never refer to it as English within Guild Wars 2, but they're speaking English, right? We all understand it. Or if you're playing on the German client or whatever, then they'll be speaking in German. But they have their spoken language, and then they have a very specific written language. Text, when you view it outside of the UI or speaking to characters and so forth, when you actually just view it in-game on objects, and so forth, you'll see it's a totally different script. That language is essentially just a cipher. So you've got the letter A, B, and C, which you can imagine what they look like in our language, but they have totally different symbols for New Crichton. Okay, and this can all be learnt by you, the player. You can learn all of that, and actually then, as you explore around the world of Guild Wars 2, as you explore around Tyria, you can translate all of that text and read it, basically, which is very cool. So you might have noticed, I notice it most when I'm in pubs and so forth around the game world, and you see those signs, particularly those areas around Kryta. You see that all the time, and that's always the most obvious to me. But if you look closely, books that are on tables, paintings that are on walls, even stuff that's just etched into objects around the world, it's all there in New Crichton. It can all be translated. Sometimes it's got pretty funny stuff, other times it's got some pretty intriguing stuff about the world. A lot of the time it's just little bits of flavour, references to the first game, for example, and so forth, that is all very easy to miss out on, right? Because for 99% of us who don't actually know the language. And before the game came out, I did desperately want to learn it for myself, particularly for the LP videos. I was like, oh yes, I can be translating as we go, and that'll be all unique, that'll be so cool. But I just found it, I spent a good week or so trying to learn it, but I found it really difficult and ended up putting it down. I still have like a huge pad of paper that I was writing on, like somewhere behind me right now, that I kept telling myself I was going to go back to, but I never did in the end. So that kind of got put on the back burner for me until like sometime last week, and cue this amazing tool that somebody's done here that will actually help you to learn New Crichton. It's really cool. So if you're even slightly interested in learning this, then you can go on and have a blast. I've only spent about an hour And in that hour, I have a bit of a leg up because I've been learning before, so I already recognise some of the symbols. But in about an hour, I'm getting pretty competent at it. I know what most of the letters are. I know how to translate a lot of them now. And I'm not entirely fluent. You couldn't just throw a block of text in front of me written in New Crichton. I can just read it to you straight up and just be like, okay, this says this, this, and this. But you could probably get to that point through this tool alone. I know an awful lot of the alphabet now. The way it works is it will throw a symbol up at you, and then you've just got to box and you just type a letter in and hit enter, and it will tell you whether you got it right or whether you got it wrong. And just slowly through a process of elimination, trying again, you'll learn all of the keys and what the letters are, because when you get it wrong it tells you what the correct letter was. So just slowly it begins to seep in. It is a bit frustrating and it will take a little while to twig, but then it will just start to snowball, and as there are fewer letters for you to learn, it becomes easier to get those into your head. Also, it's got a tool there where you can just type in the box, and as you type, as you press say A on your keyboard, the writing that comes up on your screen will actually be the New Crichton equivalent. So I could write, hello, my name is Wooden Potatoes, and there on screen in front of me it will have already translated it to New Crichton. So for me, I typed in certain chunks of the alphabet that I was having problems with, so I could refer back down to those when I was trying to do the challenge. It keeps a tally of the amount of times you've tried to input a letter versus how many times you've got it correct. At the moment, my ratio is 304 to 451, though I didn't spend the entire time just doing that little game. There are other things you can do. You can set it to letters, you can set it to numbers, and then even entire words. There's other sections as well. There's a section of the website that's currently disabled, I believe, called sentences. So I guess eventually we'll be able to translate entire sentences, which is really cool. And also different languages as well. As I mentioned earlier, New Crichton isn't actually the only language in Guild Wars 2, written language. There's also Old Crichton, which is what we saw in Guild Wars 1. I believe there are some others. I believe Old Ascalonian text is also in-game, and possibly, in fact, no, definitely Asuran is also in-game there too. But aside from that, I'm not sure what else there is. In Guild Wars 1, there was an awful lot of different languages and stuff, but many of them were incomplete. So we could only translate small portions of them because they weren't used extensively throughout the game. New Crichton is the primary language of Guild Wars 2. So if you just learn that on its own, that'll see you through many places. Maybe eventually I'll learn some of the others, but I'll hold my breath on that until I've at least learnt New Crichton. But yeah, it's really good. I wanted to do a bit of a spotlight on it. Next week, I'll talk about some other cool tool or something. I know there's a lot to do with the market and so forth. I've not really used them myself that much at the moment. It's a bit weird for me in game at the moment because I kind of finished with my Elementalist, and I do believe there's a lot to do. There are still some explorable modes of dungeons, a fair few in fact, that I haven't seen, but I don't know, I'm having a bit more fun on alts, for example, or I'm just spending more time on kind of the LP. It's interesting to me with Guild Wars 2, and I'm beginning to feel that tug as well, and I'm curious if you guys too are, where I feel like I'm kind of done with it, or that I know there's some left to do, but I'm not that compelled to go off and do it, and I'm kind of, on my main character at least, less and less in game and focusing on other stuff. And it's curious, because there's more to do in Guild Wars 2 that's new for me than there ever was in Guild Wars 1, and yet that's just not there. Maybe I've changed slightly as a gamer or something. But yeah, so on that topic, as I say, going for a legendary isn't going to happen for me for a while. Maybe putting it off isn't a good idea. Maybe prices will become even more inflated and so forth. But grinding my way through 1,000,000 karma, and it looks like really the best way to do it is just going through those certain areas and ore consistently. Doesn't sound like my cup of tea right now. I'm just not that interested in grinding that much, particularly for the karma, but the money as well is going to be quite a lot. There are certain aspects to creating legendary weapons, like the Mystic Clovers, that are a bit of a gamble, and that I don't like the sound of either, because the Mystic Clovers alone, like, almost double the amount of karma you need to get the legendary weapons, and it's just pretty crazy. So I will get them eventually, or at least one eventually, just not right now. That'll be one achievement that's probably going to be on my list for a long time that I've not actually got filled in, because there's an achievement for getting all the legendary weapons, which is ridiculous, but I like it. I like more ridiculous achievements. They should have been more in from the launch of the game anyway. But so instead of that, for today, for this week at least, I might figure out something more permanent next week. I thought I'd answer at least one question from you guys. This was from Mac7727, who said, I'm having trouble finding a nice leveling build for my Elementalist. I keep swapping and trying different things, but I can't really find something that grabs my interest. What would you recommend? For me, and this doesn't just count for Elementalists, I feel this way on a lot of classes, mobility is my favourite thing for generic PvE, and even, to tell you the truth, other areas of the game too. Maybe not dungeons so much, I don't care so much about mobility there as I do just survivability and being able to get the damage out, but for general PvE, it's got to be mobility for me. That's why I enjoyed the Elementalist so much. When I first started playing, I was leveling a Mesmer, but I wasn't enjoying it that much because I'd known from the betas how much you can move around as an Elementalist, and it feels to me like once you've got a taste of that, once you've been able to zip around all over the place, not just with Ride the Lightning, but just the sheer amount of swiftness you get as an Elementalist, once you've been able to enjoy the luxury of that, it's hard to go back to a different class. The Mesmer does have some ability. It's got a blink. The Mesmer blink is on a shorter cooldown than the Elementalist blink, and it has the exact same range. They, to me, seem like they should be skills that are balanced exactly in tune with one another. The Elementalist version's weaker than the Mesmer's version, but I suppose you can trait the Ele version, but you can probably trait the Mesmer version too. So in any case, the Mesmer does have that, but the fact it doesn't have much swiftness or many other skills that allow it to move around, I wasn't having that much fun with it. So if you're feeling the same, maybe on your Elementalist, I would definitely go for stuff that allows you to move around quickly. Damage, you don't have to spec massively into damage on any class for PvE. You really don't. The amount of situations where you'll be coming across something you can't kill on your own, it's probably not because you haven't spec'd into damage. It's probably just because you're in an event or the enemy is a champion and you're not meant to kill it on your own in the first place. So don't feel bad about that. I would encourage anyone to try stuff outside of raw damage. Raw damage tends to be a bit more plain, and it's not as exciting when you're in game because, oh yeah, look, I'm doing bigger numbers, but the way you're doing the damage is just still your regular skills, and you're not seeing interesting conditions on them, or you're not getting cool boons on yourself. You're not having the chance for weird stuff to proc. It's just a more bland experience, really, if you go flat out damage. But if you try some of these other things, then you might be surprised. There's a lot of traits out there in the game for any class. I've been playing a fair bit of Thief recently too, that at first you just don't really see the appeal of them. You think, hey, is that really that good? I can't imagine that being that amazing. But when you try it out, it's really fun, and you're noticing there's all these different stuff that you can watch out for in fights and different ways that they can interact with your skills. So I know I'm being very non-specific about the Elementalist right now. I think that's mostly because I've already shown everyone what I settled on with my Elementalist with those 2 build videos I did. I have been slowly refining it a little bit. As you saw yesterday on the footage in the background, I was doing a bit of a weird Signet build that was proccing auras whenever I used a Signet, and then the auras were proccing other boons on me, and I was still getting the effects of the Signets while they were on cooldown. It was okay, but I haven't done that much SPVP at this point, so I don't feel like I was too effective with it. There's a lot of stuff you can try like that. That would be my main recommendation. Outside of just weapons, Elementalist for weapons, I would say avoid the staff. A lot of people fall into the trap of, oh, I'm going to use the staff on the edit. Yeah, I want to use the staff. The staff's actually kind of boring. It's all just ground targeted AoE stuff that you can cast at a very long range, and you'll just see damage kind of tick off of people. You don't move in very interesting ways. There's only one skill that really throws you in a direction, and that's skill 4 on fire. Any other combination you do whatsoever, I know I've been talking a lot about dual daggers for a long time, but even if you go Scepter or Focus, they all have far more interesting ways of fighting. Focus is a weird one. I wouldn't really recommend it for generic PvE stuff. It's a great weapon, it really is, for defense. It's got incredible amounts of defense on it, but that's also why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for PvE, because a lot of the abilities are kind of situational and dependent on your enemies actually attacking you an awful lot, and you'll notice a lot in PvE they don't. If you've got an ability that makes you invulnerable, for example, just like you do in Earth on the Focus for an Elementalist, in PvE it's interesting because a lot of enemies will attack you once and then they'll stand about not doing anything for a long time, if you notice, and then they'll attack you again. It's very easy to blow stuff like that would be super effective in PvP because you know someone's going to attack you or maybe lay down some really deadly combo on you. But for PvE, it's just wasted and it just doesn't feel that fun. So Focus is a bit like that. I kind of avoid it for PvE, but still, it opens up some interesting avenues of play. So that would be my main recommendation. Go into traits that proc interesting and weird effects that you might not even think are that good when you look at them on paper, and also try to avoid using the staff. That would be my advice just for Elementalist at least, and maybe you'll have a bit more fun. Talking purely from I want to have fun while leveling up standpoint, not what's the most effective thing to be doing. A very different argument there. So yeah, that would be my main suggestion. In any case, that was Guild Wars 2 Daily for today. Thank you very much for watching, and if you'd like to join in on the footage in the background, which today should have been World versus World, you can follow me on Twitter, and every day I announce about an hour before I head on in-game and we do some cool stuff. So thanks very much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.